Hello, my name is Ollie, and today we will look at some basic strategies for the board game Ticket to Ride. Just a couple of things before we start. First, I'm assuming you are already familiar with the basic rules and gameplay. If not, have a look at the official How to Play video. There's a link in the video description below. Second, these strategies will be discussed from the perspective of a two-player game, though the strategies mostly apply for 3 to 5-player games as well. Let's start by looking at the average scores that top players get compared to non-top or other players. Keep in mind, these are averages for two-player games. Playing down trains to claim train routes is by far the highest, but it does happen that you will get games where you score more in ticket points than train points, though these games are relatively rare occurrences, only occurring in about 2% of the games I have looked at that involve top players. There are two main strategies for gaining points: going for ticket points or going for route points. To get lots of ticket points, the general idea is to have connected train routes from west to east, such as from Los Angeles to New York, forming a main axis. You then continue taking and completing tickets that are near this main axis. The hope is that one can get free tickets from all the connected routes, or at worst, a ticket that is only one train route away for completion. Getting lots of route points is usually a matter of taking as many of the 6-car routes as possible, while trying to get longest train. The scoring breakdown table suggests that the better option is to go for the route points, but why is that? With tickets, there is luck involved in getting tickets that match well. Worse, if you do not complete a ticket, you take a negative hit to your score, so the penalty is high. With routes, there's a bit of luck in getting the right train colors so that you can play 6 of the same color, but that luck can be mitigated, for example, by picking up the open face cards that you need. It takes more turns to score well with ticket points because you need to spend turns taking tickets and often playing small train routes to complete them. This last point is a big reason why the top players focus on route points, but before we look at it in more detail, I want to show you a game where there was more ticket points scored than route points. The game starts well for our top player as they get the Los Angeles-Miami ticket. They also need to go up to New York, which sets up a long axis. Surprisingly, the other player opts to play the 2-car track between Houston and New Orleans. I say surprising because we find out at the end of the game that the other player had the Winnipeg-Houston ticket, and typically you would go the other direction, towards El Paso. It means a small adjustment in path is necessary so that instead of going this way along the bottom, they will now go this way and just create a branch to Miami. The routes to New York and Miami are secured, and our top player can resume collecting cards. Tickets completed. Our top player could have completed the game in 5 turns from here and taken both the 6-car pink and orange tracks, and maybe even gotten longest train by connecting through Toronto. That would give a good final score of 123 points, with 34 points gained from placing 4 routes and another 10 for longest path. Perhaps our top player knew that they were playing a weaker player given how the tracks are played and decided to try something different for fun. However the choice came, they started going for tickets. 2 tickets, each taking 1 turn to complete. 3 turns, 32 points. This is an excellent draw, and yet our top player could have gotten the same amount of points just playing trains down. The next draw was unlucky, but only meant a 5-point hit. Calgary Salt Lake City would mean 18 points for the 3 turns. Not great, but doable. However, there are still 2 long free tickets available: Los Angeles to New York and San Francisco to Atlanta, and 1 other doable long ticket, Seattle to New York. Unbelievably, both the 2 free tickets show up, and 1 more that is doable. While it is incredibly lucky, if you believe the idea that you make your own luck, then this only happens for our top player because they created the long axis to begin with. 9 turns played for 95 points. Luck aside, those 4 extra turns would not have existed had our top player played another top player. So now, let's discuss turns. There are a variable number of turns in the game, with the total number dependent on when a player only has 2 or less train cars left in their pile. You start the game with 4 train cars and 45 train cars, and every top player I have looked at follows a similar strategy to the following. Use 20 turns to pick up 40 cards. Use 9 to 12 turns to play your 44 trains down, ideally on the 6-car routes, but sometimes smaller ones to complete your tickets and gain the longest path. The specifics vary a bit. For example, sometimes a player literally spends their first 20 turns picking up cards, while others might pick up on the first 15 turns and then put a train route down. Sometimes the drawn cards don't quite match what is needed and a player will take a single open-faced wild card, but overall, the strategy is generally the same. Depending on what tickets are being completed and what the opponent is doing, sometimes a player will only take as little as 9 turns to play their trains down, and is usually done within 12 turns. If a player collected all the right card colors and their opponent let them take all the 6 card tracks, you could theoretically trigger the end of game condition on your 28th turn. The animation you just saw was from an actual game, and here's another one where 29 turns were played in the game that I will discuss more fully. The 2 tickets taken are small, but are along the high-scoring optimal corridor that I will explain later in this video. In this game, the top player took cards for the first 20 turns, with only the very last 2 card draws being from the open-face cards. After that, 8 straight plays, placing 43 trains down and then 1 last turn for the last train. Total points for train routes is 100 plus 10 for longest path. Ticket points were small, only 12 points, but even if it were 0, it is enough to beat the average score of non-top players. 20 turns were used to collect the cards, so the 122 points were achieved in 9 turns for an average of a little over 13 points per turn. Top players average a little under 11 points per playing turn, so if one is going to win using the ticket strategy, not only do you need to get your train route access played down, but you need to get 11 points for free if you pick up tickets, or 22 points if it takes 1 turn to complete the new tickets, because don't forget that it takes a turn to pick up tickets. Just over half the tickets in the game are worth 11 points or more, and given that you would already need the train routes played, the probability of getting lucky is quite low to get a free ticket that is worth it. In the first game we looked at, the top player got really lucky in the first extra ticket draw, but still only got 32 points from 3 turns. The top player would have also gotten 32 points just playing tracks, but without the luck required. Some people have commented on how boring it is to just focus on playing the long train routes. It's far more fun going for tickets. That may be, but if you want to win against the top players, it's not likely to happen by going for tickets. Looking at which routes the top players play down, we can see that they play most of the big 6-car 15-pointers, more than double any other track. Helena Duluth is the most frequently played route and is the point at the 10 mark on the x-axis. We can end the video here as now you know what to focus on to win the game, but if both players focus on the 6-car routes, then who wins will come down to who has the longest path and the tickets completed. So, let's continue. There are 2 main places in Ticket to Ride where luck is a factor: the cards you draw and the tickets you start with. The card luck can be mitigated a bit by choosing the open face cards, but there is no such possibility when it comes to the 3 tickets that you start the game with. Against the top player, if you get a bad draw and your opponent has a good one, it is very unlikely you will win. So, what is a good ticket draw? If we just look at completing the shortest route between cities in a ticket, then we can calculate an average points per turn to complete the ticket, as represented in the table by the shortest column. However, this information is somewhat meaningless because in reality, the path chosen will optimally go along the 6-car tracks for reasons described earlier. So I calculated the optimal column, which maximizes the average points per turn by going on a longer route to capture the big tracks. For example, the Denver-El Paso ticket is worth 4 points, and the shortest path to completion is to go on the 2-car tracks from Denver to Santa Fe and then on to El Paso. That gives 8 points total across 2 turns for an average of 4 points per turn. Instead, the optimal path goes from Denver to Phoenix to Los Angeles and then back across to El Paso for 33 points in 3 turns, averaging 11 points. What's more, the train route can be extended to Houston for another 15 points in one turn to continue your longest train. So the best scoring ticket is not necessarily the longest one, but the one that takes into account the best routes, which means tickets that can use the 6-car tracks and avoid the 1 and 2-car tracks. The 6-car tracks cluster in the north and south of the board, so any ticket that starts or ends in either of those clusters has a chance to be good. That is what makes the Los Angeles-Miami track the best scoring ticket, as it uses the southern cluster. But the low ticket value Sault Ste. Marie, Oklahoma City is also surprisingly good, because instead of connecting on the short tracks via Duluth, Omaha, and Kansas City, you can go on the long tracks to Winnipeg first and then Calgary, next to Seattle, and back along the 6-car track to Helena before dropping down through Denver. Now, we're not just choosing one ticket at the beginning of the game, but two. Ideally, the two tickets work together, so you put one set of tracks down to be used for both tickets. The next picture attempts to show which tracks are used for all 30 tickets when using the optimal routes. The thicker the line, the more frequently it is used for a ticket. The thickest line runs from Denver to Helena, where I calculated 16 tickets would use this route. Where there is no black line means that no ticket would use that route for optimal points. What clearly shows up is that there is a corridor that connects the two previously discussed 6-car clusters from Helena to Phoenix via Denver. So the best two tickets for combining are along the clusters and/or the corridor. Looking at how the top players choose their tickets, we see that there is a fairly strong correlation between how often a ticket is chosen, normalized to 10, and the optimal points scored for that ticket. For example, the most popular ticket, Vancouver-Montreal, is taken almost 5 times more often than the least popular ticket, Boston-Miami. That the correlation is visible is quite remarkable, given the luck involved in drawing tickets. And that leads to a discussion about getting the 10 points for the longest path. Scoring for the longest path is what I call a zero-sum game, unlike how other points are scored. That means someone is going to get 10 points for the longest path, no matter what. Your 10-point gain is your opponent's 10-point loss, and vice versa. Therefore, in a 2-player game, it is really important to win this, because it is actually worth 20 points, the same as the longest tickets. While you only get 10 points, your opponent gets nothing. If your opponent gets longest path, then you get nothing, which is a 20-point swing. I've made it sound so easy to just claim the 6-car tracks, but of course, you need the right cards to claim them, and you need to claim them before your opponent does. Here are a few observations about taking cards. First, watching the top players, they almost always take 2 cards from the top for at least their first 13 to 15 turns before doing anything else. Why is that? To answer the question, we need to introduce some basic math. Suppose we need 6 orange cards to complete the Helena-Duluth track. There are 12 cards in each color, along with 14 wild cards, for a total of 110 cards. Therefore, on average, an orange card should show up 1 in every 9 randomly drawn cards. So you can expect to get about 5 orange cards if you randomly receive 45 cards. How will you get the 6th orange card? You can draw more cards, but then you are wasting turns. You can take an open-faced orange card, but what if there isn't one to take? You can use a wild card, but the only way to get them if you want 2 cards on a turn is to take from the top of the stack. So coming back to the original question, top players usually take 2 from the top for their first 13 to 15 turns to maximize their chances of getting wild cards, knowing that they can usually make use of all the colors that they pick up. Sometimes the top players will even do all 20 turns picking up cards from the top, but usually they will begin taking from the open-faced cards to get the colors that they still need, as their turns for picking up cards are running out. One other reason to take 2 from the top is because if you take an open-faced card, you are signaling to your opponent which track you want to play down. If at the beginning of the game you take 2 orange open-faced cards, then it is highly likely that you are going for the Helena Duluth track. If I also want that track, then I may play down my trains much earlier than normal, using wildcards to secure that track before you. Signaling your intentions speaks directly to the next topic on blocking. The forums are full of people expressing their frustrations about people blocking them and saying it should be banned because it is mean. It may be mean, but the rules do not explicitly talk about blocking. As one of the top players, Drakestorm, writes, "So the designer, the developer, the publisher, top players, and most sane people agree that any kind of blocking is okay. But apparently that just isn't good enough to end this argument." Rather than enter into the debate on whether blocking is acceptable or not, I want to suggest that you play so as not to be blocked in the first place. And that brings us back to signaling. If the first trains you play down are for the two-car track between Houston and New Orleans, then it is highly likely that you either have the Los Angeles-Miami ticket or possibly the San Francisco-Atlanta ticket. Either way, if your opponent has the green cards, they will want to play down the El Paso-Houston route, not just because it blocks you, but also because it is a valuable route, whether they need it for their ticket or not. Why not start with the El Paso-Houston route first? As we saw earlier, there are many optimal routes that use this track, so it is unlikely your opponent is going to play the Houston-New Orleans track to block you, since they won't even think you need it. The other point I want to make about blocking is that often it is not as beneficial as you think. If I put 2 trains down to block your path, that is 1 turn for 2 points. It better cause you to waste turns getting around the blockade, because the opportunity cost for that turn is my average of 11 points. In addition, the 2 trains are unlikely to be connected to my longest path, so I potentially put another net 20 points at jeopardy by trying to block you. I would probably only consider blocking if I believe I'm in a losing position based on the tracks already played down. Well, that's it. Hopefully this strategy video helps you in your next game of Ticket to Ride. Thank you for watching and happy playing!